Welcome, everybody, to RISE Learning Machines seminars. I am Olof Mogren, and I'm a researcher on foundational and applied machine learning at RISE. RISE is Sweden's public research institute, and this is our weekly seminar on AI and machine learning. This meeting will be recorded, so let us know if you want to be removed from this recording. And also, remember to check out our collection of great talks on YouTube. Today, I have the pleasure to introduce to you Professor Matthias Obst, who's sitting right behind me here, who's associate professor at University of Gothenburg. Matthias works on marine evolution, benthic ecology, and biodiversity monitoring. And today's topic is digital twins and observation systems for monitoring marine biodiversity and change. With this said, I will hand over the word on the screen sharing to you, Matthias.
Okay, thank you so much, Olof. Thanks everybody out there for tuning in to the seminar. So I will share my screen now and give you about 40 minutes presentation of one of the research topics I'm working with, which is digital twins, and associated to that, the observation systems that we need to build for digital twins in the ocean. So this is a very marine talk. There are many applications to non-marine environments, but since I'm a marine biologist, I will keep sticking to that topic. Good. The idea with this this seminar is now to advertise a little bit the project we are doing, and I'm not talking about myself. It's a larger community that works towards building this digital twin of the ocean, and this is a massive undertaking. It's a very visionary work. So we have started this, and we need help, from all kinds of technical and research perspectives. We need help and collaboration. So please see this as an option to discuss further if there is a common interest to collaborate in the future on any of these topics I mentioned. Okay, so what I thought about is like I talk a little bit about the digital twin concept and how it's implemented in the ocean, and especially for biodiversity. And then I will mention that where I think Sweden is sticking out with some good examples where we are leading this development. And then I'm going to mention some examples of how this can be actually used in the near future for societal applications and generating benefits for society. So let's start with this concept of the digital twin. Where's it coming from? Well, the digital twin idea to set this off, to build a digital twin of the ocean, is a part of the Ocean Decade strategy. And there is this 10 challenges that should be addressed within this 10 years of time, 2021 to 2030. So challenge number 8 is about creating a digital representation of the ocean, including a map, but also giving the access to all the data and analytical tools that you need to understand the ocean, just as you would understand a physical system. And the interesting piece of that is that it should be achieved by 2030. And of course, there will be not all singing and all dancing digital twin of the ocean by 2030, but I think it's pretty realistic that we get a good first rigid scaffold of the digital twin of the ocean as we wanted to have, and then build further on that in the following decade. So coming back to the concept, the very concept of the digital twin in general, it's a concept that does not come from science. It's coming from engineering, and it's been used in engineering for at least 20 years. So we are trying to learn from this engineering perspective and transforming that into more scientific application. What it is defined in the engineering world is it is a virtual representation of the physical objects or systems, and this is used to do a modeling and designing and testing what-if scenarios. So you don't have to do it in the real world. And can be cheaper, but it can also be impossible to do it in the real world. So for this reason, you're creating a digital copy that you can play around with. So that's what it's used for today in engineering. And if we're looking into what we have done in the last 60 years in the marine world, you could wonder, why is there anything new about it? Because we're doing a lot of modeling and predictions and digital analysis already. So what's new? Well, the new thing is that it's really a continuous and iterative modeling. That is the core, at least in my opinion, on the digital twin. So far, we've done always simulations and modeling exercises, but they usually draw from all the data available and they simulate and they stop it there. But the digital twin will then reiterate, and based on the simulations results, you will change the sensors and improve the sensors and feed new data in new and continuous data into the modeling component, and thereby continuously remodel and align the physical and the digital twin. And on top of that, there's many new assets that only popped up in the last decade. That is like extended reality, cloud computing, IoT, deep learning, artificial intelligence, and all of these things that are wonderful assets that we can use. So to start with, this alignment, there is a physical system and a virtual system, and these two arrows in between them, they're really important, because the conventional way has been always that the physical system provides data to the virtual system and then you can analyze. But now the new thing really is that there is also this feedback loop, and that can be informations, decisions, and processes. And I will give you examples of that. That will make this possible, that these two layers are constantly aligned, and in the best case, they will be identical eventually. But we're not trying to get there, not in this decade. So it's important when I'm talking now about biodiversity that to mention that there is a lot of data and twins already out there, and they are so far starting with the lowest hanging fruit, which is basically ocean observation from remote sensing resources such as satellites and oceanographic and physical chemical features, but very little biology and in particular biodiversity. So let's take a few examples, like for a marine system that we are interested in to look at and to make a digital twin of. Let's say we have an offshore wind farm or an aquaculture or a marine protected area. And then you would have this classical picture that you have on one side, the physical twin, on the other side, the digital twin, and the interchange in between. Now, you see, for biodiversity, there's all these things. They are already there. They have been developed. We have like these, the wind parks out there. We have marinas and ports. We have aquacultures out there. We have the ecosystem that is the host for these human-made structures. We have a lot of processes in these components, like oceanographic and biogeochemical processes. And then you need to have these biodiversity observatories that constantly report and sense the biodiversity that is there, and then will end up into databases that then get used for modeling. And then there is some sort of adaptive management. So that basically the models will tell you, oh, you put the aquacultures rather 50 kilometers north than south because of some of the results you got. Or it's better to combine the aquacultures with the wind parks rather than putting them separate for some process that you have modeled in advance. But again, when we're coming to this, when we're designing all this, it's very important to keep the optimization criteria in mind, that when we're coming from the engineering perspective, that is not the same. The goal of a digital twin is to optimize the performance of a system, and that can be a factory setup or something, a city or part of a city. And then the optimization criteria is efficiency and economy, of course. But we don't want to optimize aquacultures or wind farms to produce more margins, so to say, to be more efficient and economically more viable. That's another digital twin, but we want to optimize them so they increase ecological sustainability. That is our only major criterion that is very important, that because you can very well optimize aquacultures to produce more fish, but they will probably be not more ecologically sustainable. So they will fall over at some point. So that is important to keep in mind, that we need to keep that in mind as we design this. And if I look at the things that are there and that are not there, then the red ones these are the ones, the weak points. This is the flaws we have right now in the design. That's what we don't have. So anyone who wants to build a digital twin of the ocean that takes care, that can increase ecological sustainability, has to build these things. The biodiversity observatories, there's almost nothing out there, and the databases that capture those data. So that's what we are building now, and we need all the help we can get. So this is not a 3 years activity. It will go on for 10 years or more. But here you see that we are not alone. There's a huge community coming up, and the overarching organization is the Decade program that kind of coordinates all these different activities. And then there is one only on the IT infrastructure. That's the editor. It's the mothership of the digital twin of the ocean, and everyone feeds into it. And then there is some projects, they are more concerned with interoperability, making existing resources available, and also creating different digital twins for different purposes. And the project I'm participating in is the one only focusing on the biodiversity component. So this is the picture as specific as we can be of it now. It has the ocean somewhere, and then that's the system, the digital system we want to create. And then there is the data lake. And I guess you are familiar with the concept of a data lake. So we're trying to create these data products, not necessarily raw data, but more or less organized structures, data that are already designed or created for a bespoke purpose. And they will be available in the data lake. And then you have the engine that contains analytical layers, such as modeling, like biogeographic modeling, for example, or biodiversity. But underneath, there is deeper analytical resources we need, like AI tools, data management tools, and these things. So they are being built right now, and we're kind of starting somewhere and then trying to populate both lake and engine. So here's a little example of the projects we have. We have use cases. So we have bespoke cases that are kind of going all the way, end-to-end connections created from the point of sensing to the point of the societal applications. So these are listed there in the table from 1 to 8 in alien species or invasive species management. It's a big problem, especially related to shipping. Offshore constructions, that's the wind parks. Pelagic diversities, that's kind of algal blooms and harmful algal blooms. Sustainable mariculture, this is the aquaculture sector. And MPA management, MPA means marine protected area. So there have to be some areas that have to be offset just to be protected from the human activities, so biodiversity can recover there. And so these are, and what we said now for the next 4 years, we don't try to create cases for all of these that should completely reflect all the advantages that a digital twin can offer. And you see these advantages on the left side. These are typical digital twin added values, why anyone would invest in it. And once you do it, you have a competitive advantage having a digital twin. One thing is the system optimization. So let's say you have an ecosystem and you can reshuffle the components in the ecosystem. That's an advantage because you have modeled it before. Also, another advantage is to be able to sense and anticipate important events before they happen, or as close to it as before they happen. And that's a completely different advantage of having this ability of a digital twin. Another one is that you actually produce knowledge cheaper, better, or faster than before. So it's not that you create anything new, but you create new knowledge, but you could create it also without the digital twin, but you will create it faster. So that can be an advantage in itself. And then the most important thing, especially in the construction phase, is the data gaps, that it helps you to understand where you need to add data and collect data. And only when you have achieved that, then the other ones become more powerful. But then, of course, the last one is a systems understanding, a systems research. Let's say uh, emergent properties and non-linear interactions between system components. For that, you can also use a digital twin, and it's very complicated to do it without it. So we try to distribute this so not all of these use cases are actually getting overloaded with too much ambitions. So only every use cases may only look at one or two of these added values. So these are these use cases, and now we can go and dive into some of the applications here on the West Coast. And it starts with the observation systems that support the DTO. These are the sensor systems that are feeding data into the DTO. And we have a lot of it on the West Coast here in Sweden. So if you see from the left to the right, that's a timeline. On the left, you see 100 years ago, there was a lot of research here. It was one of the best places in the world on the Swedish West Coast to do marine biology. So we have this wonderful station you see below there. That's Christineberg 100 years ago. And most of the research and the data produced, they were from 100 meters around the station. And so it was also with when you had expeditions, they could just go where the ship went. And that developed these kind of tools and equipment we have developed very fast, that we have now these wonderful toys to explore the ocean, collect data from almost any point in the ocean. We can go, the access range has increased tremendously, and the automation level has increased tremendously. So it has a great opportunity to use that to create big data and put it to use and feed it into the DTO. But so far, these two developments of the DTO and the sensor systems, they have not been synced. So we're syncing them now. So one supports the other. And just for you, if you're not a biologist, it's kind of very new, this whole big data movement. It's kind of a big wave sweeping in over the biological community. They used to work with Excel a lot, and the data you had was never more than 500 megabytes at best. But now we have these machines that can go out and they can create terabytes and terabytes of data. So there is in this review we did a few years ago, we looked at what is the low-hanging fruits, what is the stuff that we can that is most tangible to work with in terms of data-driven ecology and data and also big data ecology. So the satellite stuff is very, very good. It's very advanced, but you don't see a lot in the ocean from satellites. You see some of it, but not a lot of biology you can sense. But the genetic methods, they really have a lot of potential. And then the image methods. And then also this kind of citizen science where you can use humans as sensors. You program them with PDF files and with YouTube videos, and then they go out and they work syntactic. They were all doing all the same thing and work as sensors. So that is another powerful approach. But if we're looking at what's missing here, is there's some underlying important elements missing, like we need to have these standard operating procedures for robots as much as for humans, that everyone does the same thing. So you create data that can be compared and analyzed together. And that works, it works all very well for the satellite part, but that's because the data are already born digitally, and there's always, the satellite covers so much geographical areas that it's easy, it's integrated from the beginning. You don't have to integrate it after you generate the data. So we are working on these pieces here, on the data management, the data processing, and the archiving. And so if we're going into some examples, I start with the genetics. So we're putting these sensors out, and that's a network we're coordinating here from Sweden. These small, like 9 layers, they are like, like 30 centimeters in size, these plates. and we put it on the seafloor everywhere in the European coast, and especially on the Swedish coast. So we have a very dense sampling on the Swedish coast. And then it's like a small hotel. You put it there for 3 months and you see everyone moving in. And then you bring it up and you can peel it apart and you can photograph it, and then you sequence, you get the whole genetic information from that community that was living on the seafloor. And it is very close to the community that is actually living next to that. So you get a very good picture of it. So here, this is what it looks like. And on our marine stations, we have them deployed every year. And it's a very beautiful community. We need divers to bring them up for now. But with some of our partners, they're using robots to deploy them in the deep sea and bring them up. Okay, so this is what do we get from this data? This is only results from this net from the first campaign that went for 2 years, 2018, 2019, 15 places, 56 of these small hotels, and about 600 samples. And this is a rough overview. If you're not working with genetics, I don't go into details, but what you see here is on the third row, like how many species can you identify where you actually have a name attached to it? And it's about 1,000 species altogether. We can overview and track 1,000 species across the European coastline, which is nothing. It's quite unprecedented. Before has been 100 or 200 that it could be over such a large scale could be tracked, and this is comparable, a very small effort. But that's because we're using now the machines to collect the observations for us rather than we do it ourselves. And here you see some subset where you're looking at, because most of the people who want to understand biodiversity, how it's changing, they're not necessarily looking at everything. They're looking at what they call key species. If there is a species that is indicative for a certain condition, let's say it's very picky. It's a very picky species. It only lives in very specific environments. And then you could say that they're very sensitive. So if you know these species, if you can track them, you know this is good habitat. This is healthy habitat. So we can track them, and the opposite would be alien species, the red ones. No, the red ones are critically endangered species. And then the green ones are the ones that are registered as alien. They shouldn't be there. And they're transported by ship with ships. So we can track all of this and having these sensors in place. And here you see, like when you're tracking this across a gradient of human activities, where you have an industrial on the left side, and then LHI means low human influence. That is basically an area where it's not protected, but it's also not exposed to any human activity. It's like somewhere in the sea. And then on the third one, you have actively protected areas. And then you see we can track that there is a significant rise, or we can track these influences that the more or the less human, or the more protection you have, the more species you get. So we get these signals. That's important. We can use these signals to understand the impact of human activities in the ocean. And they can be positive and they can be negative. So it's not a solution to say, no, you're not allowed to build a wind farm here, but we can still measure and then change it and model the changes and see, well, if you build the wind farm like that, or then you're actually increasing biodiversity. You're having a biodiversity positive effect. That's what everybody tries to achieve now, what they call net positivity. And the human activity is creating a positive effect. It's bringing back biodiversity. So until some years ago, you only had to show that you're not messing up the environment. But now that's not enough anymore. You can't be neutral. You have to be positive. You have to work as a magnet for biodiversity, because otherwise we don't tackle the biodiversity crisis and the species that continuously disappear. So we have to engineer our ecosystems so they inviting back these species. And that's what we have, the sensor platforms that can do that. And that's like for the invasive species case, you see that when we're having these genetic observatories, we can then based on the occurrences we get, because these are species, they're on the move, these alien species, they are changing their distribution, they're changing they're hitchhiking with ships, and they're changing because the water gets warmer and so on. And we can model that based on the observations we make, and then we can make predictions on where they're going to go from here. So up there on the North Sea coast, you see the Dutch and the German coast, and also the coast on south coast of Denmark. That's where we actually get habitat that is suitable, but it's not there yet. So we get this kind of early warning, predictive anticipation value that the digital twin can give us. We can see what's going to happen in the next year, in this case, and can act on that. And we have another case of a species that's a tunicate that was known from Norway, and we modeled it actually in that way using these digital assets, and we could see that it gave us a positive sign for the West Coast, and we found it last year. It was detected actually there. So the models, they kind of, there's not one model that is perfect, and they all have some flaws, but we get quite a good ratio in their predictive performance. So they're not perfect, but they do predict. For some species, they actually work very well. Good. So that was the genetic component, where we're using now genetic data but they have to work as observatories and as a network, and feeding them into the digital twin of the ocean. And let's look now. So this is covered, and now let's look at the image data. And for this, because there was nothing done, literally, there's no infrastructures and very little processing mechanisms developed. So this was also an advantage, so we could build a system for this one. So for Sweden, we built this SUBSIM system. It's called the Swedish National Platform for Analysis of Subsea Images. So it's all centered around, like, you have biological data from the ocean, and you're using artificial intelligence and good data management and infrastructures to analyze this. So what the infrastructure has an annotation tool. There's two annotation tools we have for training images or training annotating images. One is more built by SGU, and it's a very specific tool, while the other one is more for the broad public. It doesn't have all the advanced function for annotating images. It's an online platform, but it's very popular, and it's used for citizen science. So we can give this to experts, but we can also give it to citizens. They can help us annotating. And then we have what we call Coastal Seafloor Observatory, which is actually a machine learning engine to train models, to test models. And then we need this infrastructure that helps us to manage all the data. So it's for the authentication and authorization, it's for scaling, it's for high performance computing, and keeping track of all the data from the beginning to the end. So the provenance is also very important. And then once you have analyzed that, there's one important thing, that you also need to make this data available. So there is a publishing module as well, that once you have species observations, you can make them available. So this is how it works in a workflow, that you have you go out and you generate data with images. You can use drones, and you can use drop cams, and you can use fixed observatories. You usually bait the objects you want to attract. You bait them, and so they come to the camera, so it's always in the same place. And then you have this temporary workspace where you upload your data, the Cloudina space, and you start the labeling. And then following this, you train the models, and these are computer vision models, and evaluate them. And then once you like it, you can publish the model. That's also important, that the model is out there so anyone else can use it and refine it if they want. And then often you want to go back to all of your data, and then you need high performance computing. So that's also a part of it. And once you run through all your data and you get some sort of data product from it, you can then do the ecological analysis and publish that. So here are a few examples from these investigations. starting with coverage of seagrass and algae, macroalgae, especially around wind farms. That's one of the things that these wind farms, they know, should now be used to create sheltered habitats. So all the plants, sorry, not the plants, but the macroalgae coming back, and they work almost like forests. Once they are back, they create habitat for 1,000 other species, not thousands, but hundreds. So they will create this biological layer, that where fish can thrive and all the creatures can come back. So it's very important then to monitor that and see, like, is it really making any progress? Is it like all these wind farms or whatever infrastructure you build, is it really getting better? Is it more of it coming back? So we have at Christineberg, we have students, they're making these, they're using these small drones to go around and start developing these algorithms. One is for object classification and one is for segmentation to measure the amount of vegetation that is in there, and also not quantify, but also classify the different amounts. So that's an ongoing project. And once this is done, we have the models and they are stable, then we can scale up. And then the robotics piece comes in, where we have robots going instead of humans. But that is not that we are not there yet. That's another one to develop object detection models for alien species. And you see, this is like, you see two goby species. They're very common now on the West Coast. One has always been here, the native black goby and the invasive brown goby. So they're difficult. Maybe they're different. I mean, in this picture, they are easy to distinguish, but one of the main features is that black spot on the back fin of the round goby. And we tested it if we can see the difference. And you see here that it actually does. So the pink one is the black goby, and now the invasive species comes in, and the model is pretty good to see the difference. You need to have this specific setup so you get the diagnostic features in the image, and then you can look at the community structure, how it's changing when the species invades, but you can also use it as an early warning system that, oh, okay, it's coming to this area. Maybe we can do an eradication effort or something. You can also use this. There's this concept of bringing like a natural defense, like you're building up a species that has gone extinct locally. Let's say cod has been diminished in our area. And as you bring it back, it will automatically defeat and push back the invader. And all of these things are possible now because we're using these kind of machine learning algorithms to build these observatories that can digest big data. And the same thing goes for aquacultures, where there's a lot of expectations that aquacultures, especially small aquacultures, they should attract a lot of biodiversity because they act like small forests that you put out in the ocean when you're growing mussels or seaweed. So we have some students, they are actually developing models to see and recognize and count the abundance of known species. Maybe it's getting not more species, but each species gets more abundant. So any of these aspects of biodiversity can be tested. And then another big issue is the trawling. So when you're looking at the West Coast, most of it looks like this, the seafloor, the deeper parts, it's just like flat plains and it's mud. And that's where all these wonderful creatures live in. And they don't live there once the trawler has passed this area, then they're gone. And we can automatically, we have here, you see an example of data that have been analyzed, but on the right-hand side, you see the machine learning based analysis. So it recognizes all these wonderful soft corals that are out there, also nephrops, that is the Norway lobster, and the burrows it lives in. So it can, we are working on this one to refine these models.
Question.
Yes.
Did you put, was there a camera in all these locations?
Yeah. It's all based on images. So that is done today, is the monitoring done with cameras a lot, but it's analyzed manually by hand. And
you drop sort of going with a camera in every one of those?
Yeah, sometimes it's drop cameras. You just have a camera that looks downward or forward, and you just drop it and then you drift. Or you have an RV that goes down, a remotely operated vehicle that goes down and goes around. Sometimes it's fixed observatory, so you just drop it and leave it there. So there's all these kind of options to generate images, but it will work the same way with sound, I mean sonar. So these are also images in a wider sense. You're creating an image, a sound image from an area or an object. So right now we stick with optical images, but the SUBSIM system works as well with sonar data, because they will be, the models will be different, but the whole data management and the wider infrastructure will be the very same way. And so we can use it in the future for that one. We can expand into sonar-based hydroacoustic images. So here's another example from the West Coast. That's up in Costa area. That's where we have the marine station, and that's where it's also Sweden's only national park under the sea. So it's the national park of the Costa Haven. And there we have made films now. We have access to movies that go 30 years back, 23 years back in time. So, and they are always from the same place. It's a wall that goes from 100 meters all the way up. And you see in these pictures, as you go up, you get a different fauna. And we could now analyze these images and from movies from 23 years, because that's impossible to do it with a human, to go through 23 years of footage to see if there's any changes based on two things. One is the water gets warmer, and because of climate change, that's a very strong, pronounced effect up there. And the other thing is that it has been protected now. 2009 came that park into the place, and then from that one, it was protected from trawling. So here you see we had one of our students, Christian Nielsen, who developed this model for 16 groups, and you can count automatically all of those in the images, and then the quality changes, not only because of the environment that changes, but it's also because of some of them, the camera setups and the quality of the images changes. You see here is a completely different environment. It's more shallow. There's more algae in the water, but it still performs fairly well. And it recognizes like all these small creatures that are hiding on the ocean. And this one is one of the old ones. That's like from 1999. So the model still works on those, even though the quality of the images, it's changing a lot. So now the question is, what can we see from that? And once we have these images, on the left side, you see that we can do habitat maps now very quickly. So you see one from 2001 and one 19 years later, and that's for the cold water coral. And you see there's a tremendous decrease that it disappeared in that area. And of course, these measurements were not standardized. They were just hovering somewhere over the seafloor. But that's what we have to do in the future. We have to make standardized measurements, so it's always in the same place. And that's only possible if it's done by machines. And then you can get much better picture of how the change and why the change is happening. On the right-hand side, you see that the extraction of the data for all these species that our student Christian did, and you see the depth profiles in each of these little boxes, and then you see it over time. So every time window. So you see, and the red line shows the median. And you see one of the idea was that actually the species are moving downstairs. They're all moving down because the water gets warmer. But you can see the distribution of the species is changing in over time, moving down, or like over time. So one of the things we saw is for the cold water coral on the left side, that there was a decline in the population, and this is also the case of this wonderful football sponge. It's a sponge this size, wonderful. It's an animal, okay, and it's very sensitive. And you see there's this tremendous drop in 2009. And that was when the park was inaugurated. And what we see here is it not coming back. The park didn't help, because the major contribution of the park is, of course, there is no trawling anymore. It's very little trawling. And it didn't bring it back. So that could be a sign of the water quality changing because of climate change. They are heat intolerant. They can't take the heat waves coming in now, even though they're very deep. So the park doesn't help in this case. But here we have indications that the park actually did help, because we have these small creatures that you see, these small cup corals that you see in number 3 in the upper picture. And below it's the one that little wonderful flower-like soft coral. And they are actually coming back. You see that. And there's a very strong signal just after 2009 when the park was inaugurated and trawling stopped. So we know from the ecology that they're actually very sensitive to the dust that is stirred up when you're trawling. You're putting a lot of dust plumes into the water column, and so the dust settles somewhere, and they don't like that. So they are sensitive to that, and when that stops, they are coming back. So we see both effects, and we can peel them apart. The causality is that some things are because of climate change, while others are due to the counter actions or the activities of the protection activities in the park, so to say. Good. And I think just to give you a quick idea of what this could look like, we made a little animation here. Now, if we're thinking forward now, the digital twin, and we have like robots going around, and then we get immediately this, we have the ability to train machine learning models and analyze it, and then get the output in forms of some visualization right away and make decisions of it. Once this would all work together, and we are far away from this, but it's just a little teaser, then it could look like this, that we have an automated system. How do I start this off? Yeah, this is just a 1-minute movie that is, so let's imagine this would be in real time, but right now it's not in real time. But you upload the movie and it starts counting automatically, and it hovers over the seafloor and finds the biodiversity hotspots, and also the places which are not biodiversity rich. Basically, that's the places where you can get going and you build something. It will not affect anything. So as the movie starts, it sets off the survey, and it will give you more or less real-time estimate on all the classes it recognizes and the accumulation of the cumulative diversity that you count there, and number of classes or whatever you want to whatever you want to see. So you could this is still not it's just really a teaser, but you could bring this analytical capability to the machines, to the robotics that is actually doing it then, and get some real-time effect. And then you see right away where are the hotspots and where are the cold spots, and make decisions based on that. And you could even in the future, in the medium future, implement a decision tree for the robot to say, like, if it's like this, then you can do this. Like, for example, if this is the mission is to find biodiversity hotspots, then it should turn left when it finds something nice, or like it would systematically make decisions on where to navigate based on how much it finds. Or
to more efficiently collect the right data.
Yes, but it could also be that it actually does something else based on the knowledge it gains. Let's say, like, you put the cable, don't put the cable there, you put the cable there. That's the obvious. That's the obvious application. You could say then, when you're putting deep sea cables or any sort of infrastructure, then you have the robot going ahead and saying, like, don't go here because we know it's hotspot, but go there. It doesn't matter for the cable, but for the biodiversity, it makes a big difference, because it will be destroyed if the cable crawler goes over and destroys the habitats. So that could be a very, I mean, that's within reach, I would say. But as I said, this was just, I mean, I showed you the data piece, genetics and images, that's the biological data resource we have. And we are working as scientists on how to turn that into ecological valuable information. But then there is the infrastructure part, there's the digital infrastructure part, databases, and the whole AI thing. And then there is a robotics part. We need these robots to develop to collect this valuable biological information. And right now, most of the robots that are in the ocean, they are made to measure temperature and salinity and these kind of things. And that's great, but they're not delivering these data. So here we need help from all corners to build these capabilities. That was everything I had, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
40 minutes. Okay.
Yeah. So while you think about all your questions, both online and here locally, when you talk about these sort of the data collection tools that you mentioned, do you envision that they sort of carry also the computation or the models that will sort of detect things while they're out collecting the data? Or do you consider them being two separate different things?
No, in the end, it would be great if the robots would have that capability. And one thing is they have to generate the data, biological data, and that works for images easier than for genetics, because for genetics you need to do a lot of chemical treatment, like you need to extract the DNA from the cells, and then you need to sequence them, and that's the process that will take longer time to move into a. There are devices that are just like this big, like a matchbox. But I don't personally, from our experience, we don't think it's something that needs more time. But for images, the data can be collected right there, so they could be analyzed right there. And you just need some medium capacity, like computation capacity, and you don't need to analyze everything. So if you could like if you have a very specific question, it doesn't have to be a big data job. I think you can have a model, for example, very simple model, or if you only analyze every 10th image rather than every frame, and then you're adjusting the computation to the question at hand, and then it doesn't have to be so computational intense, and then it could be done right there. But then the question is, what do you do? I mean, it's only helpful if you have this information in real time, if you're making a decision on it. And then who's making the decision? Is it the robot, or is it you then telling the robot? So that is something that is for the future, and it would be great to go that way. Right now, we are working on every component. One thing is that we need these sensor networks. They have to go on and create much better data. There's like most of what I've showed you is just like ad hoc data collections. They are not standardized. They're just like sporadic. And that will be the greatest benefit to begin with, will be just to work completely synced, and then you're creating data by independent surveys, but they all can come together. And that's the most important thing. The second one would be to get the human out of the loop as much as possible through automation of like this robot technology, being able to navigate and create these data themselves, creating missions. And then for now, we're doing the analytics all not in real time, and we're doing it on a separate infrastructure. But then the models we create could very well be trained for a bespoke service purpose, and then moved into a unit in the robotic component. So that's.
You mentioned sound recordings, but it's not one of the three sort of main focuses here. Would you say is that sort of underexplored? Should we
Yes,
look more into
yes, it's
sound
underexplored. I think so. Yeah. Yeah, there is a lot of interesting, there's a lot of potential, I would say, in sound recordings. I mean, hydroacoustics. But it is, I think, it's definitely worthwhile. But we wanted to do a few things first. And so we don't have the capacity to have a third track. We now in the digital twin, it's in Sweden, we are driving this genetic track and we're driving this image track, and we our collaborators in the digital twin of the ocean, they have a one on hydroacoustics. So they're doing this for hydroacoustics. But I'm not involved in it, but I know there is some people working on it. They're adding this component.
How far are we to reach the 1330 goal for marine protection?
I don't know. That is a good question. I think we're making good progress. 6 years to go. If it goes like this, we will have something, I think. But how that turns into actual turning around the ecological degradation in the ocean, that depends on how it's used and implemented by the society. So if shipping companies implement it and they use it, and if aquaculture industry use it, and if the oil and gas industry and the energy sector, if they use it, and then they will have the final decision, I think. If they don't apply any of these tools we are offering, then it will be difficult, because in the end, that's where the change is happening. That's where this can be turned around.
Yeah. We have a online question from Leif.
Yes, thank you. That was very interesting. I was just wondering, you talk about this digital twin. Do you see that digital twin as one thing, or is it a bunch of different models? Is it a distributed thing, or is it one software
one big
in
box?
one
I
place?
think, yeah, it's a very good question, and I think it will not be a big box with a lot of where you putting your question in, and then on the other side comes the answer out. So it's distributed, highly distributed, and it will probably be many digital twins of the ocean, and they may have different purposes. One digital twin for wind farms and one for shipping, something like that. But they all will draw from a common resource. So this data lake, it may very well be that this data lake is the same. But then once you created one for a given purpose, then you can easily copy that for another purpose. And that's my feeling. I know there is, the commission said that, I heard that they would like to see one. But now there's so many digital twin projects, and I mean everywhere, and also in the marine world. So I think that's what it's going to be like.
And a follow up on that, if I may,
Yes.
do you have you seen some kind of common architectures for these twins, or is it just various solutions?
No, there is this editor project. They are actually working on the technical architecture. So that is a very thorough and activity that just to build this scaffold. But we have to provide the contents. The scientists have to provide the contents, but the actual architecture will be provided by the engineering community, I would say, the computational engineering community. They're working on this. And there is one they call digital twin of the Earth, and then there is one for land, digital twin just for terrestrial ecosystems. But then there are digital twins for not biological systems, like the physical chemistry, that system. And so right now they are coming, they're starting to get working, and they appear, and it's not really clear to me, or maybe most, how they will eventually, how this landscape will shape, if it will be several, they interconnect, or if they're merging into one big thing. I don't know. at this stage.
Thank you.
Do we have some more questions? Big question. Okay. That's good, right?
Yeah.
Is there a follow-up question?
As Live has another question.
Well, if I may, then
yes, go ahead.
So I'm curious about this the data infrastructure. It sounds to me like this is a very, very huge community, and how do you kind of coordinate all of these different sources? Again, is it one data lake or some kind of data mesh, and you have several different sources, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's I mean, I would say it's organized on different levels. For one thing, the European Commission has made this commitment that like one of these 10 challenges, and they really commitment. We see that translate into money. There is a lot of projects being funded in the last years and also in the next 3 years. There's calls out. Every of these projects is maybe 10 to 20 million euro. So there is a very strong commitment to get this to make shape. And from the European Commission with this project, there comes they don't set off these projects and let people do what they want. They following this up and kind of control the structure and how it's organized. So I wouldn't say that's very organized. I mean, it is very well organized, but sufficiently well organized, we don't know. But there is definitely steering elements that will correct that if it goes too chaotic. But when you have two big projects, they're usually not so effective either. So you still have to be able to make personal connections and recognize people in a consortium. So right now you have these maybe 10 digital twin of the ocean projects, and that have some different aspect, and they themselves are very well organized, but they will have to, when they start delivering and there's infrastructure coming, and then they have to somehow work together, and there will be probably projects by the end of the decade, 27 onwards, I would say, that try to coordinate the super infrastructure, then something like that, to bring everyone together. And similar things happening on land and in other parts, and they also have to. I mean, there's many things we can learn from them, and they're building up resources. Just because we are on the ocean doesn't mean that some of the resources developed on land don't apply to us. We can use them, so there has to be an organization on that level as well. So I think there will be more of this, but I think that we are in the phase now where this gets the implementation started, and it makes more sense that you build something first and then talk about it, how you integrate it, rather than the other way around. Then it's becoming a theoretical task and not very agile.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much for your questions. They're very good questions.
I have one question.
Yes.
I'm a bit curious about is how many percentages of the oceans are protected right now by this 30 by 30 criterion? So what does it mean to protect the ocean? What are we protecting it from?
Yeah, I think we said 30% has to be protected by 2030. That's the goal. And we are still not very close to it. And what does it mean, protection? That's the other question. Does it mean, is very, in legal terms, it leaves a lot of possibilities, because it depends on what you define as protection. Protection means a no-go zone. And the no-go zone, I personally think it's impossible, because you will always run into problems. There have been humans there before. The moment you have humans in that ecosystem, they will have a say in it. And then they had to strike a balance. In the Costa case, this park was a success because they made a deal with the local populations that trawling was not 100% banned. It was in areas, I think, below 70 meters or 60 meters in the deep water. It is still allowed to trawl with restrictions. because it's an economic factor in the local populations, and it's a cultural factor as well. The shrimps from Strömstad, they're very important, and when you strike that deal, then you will have to do that everywhere when you're doing protection. But the new thing is that you make a deal, you say, okay, humans can still be active, but we want you to improve this and this and this and this. And then you have to take measures. So especially when you have new activities, you want to build infrastructure in the ocean, then you have to show afterwards there's more biodiversity than before. And for that, if anyone is serious on that, you have to put the sensors out there, because otherwise nobody will know if before and after, if that's the same or less or no. You'll never have enough data to prove anything. So that's one thing. The sensors, we need them anyway, but then on top of that, when you're getting this digital twin simulation potential, then you can already get you can get criteria. You say like, yeah, we want of this type of habitat, we want 30% more. And then you're allowed to build. And then the companies, they will do it. I'm sure they will do it. They have, many of them, they have very ambitious plans to do that, but they need the help. So what the help we can provide is with these applications that allow you to simulate and say, if we do this, then this will happen in the biological world, but also the sensor ability, because right now it's too expensive. We're still sending out too many humans. They cost a lot of money, and they will only collect data in Excel sheets, to be a little bit exaggerating. And that's not like, if we don't get big data, it's not very powerful. So you can then, these data, you can analyze it and interpret it this way or that way. So the real patterns will only come through when we're having a lot of data coming, and they have to come from machines then.
Do we have any idea of what percentage we are at today?
I know for the forest it was 15% on land. Yeah. That is now, I think it was 15% on land, the forest that is basically what you call pristine forest, that is untouched and is kind of, human doesn't touch it and use it. In the sea, I would say it's less, because you don't have any no-go zones. Not even the national park is a no-go zone. You do trawling there. And everything else is trawled all the time. It's like you hovering with a metal gear over the seafloor, or you're plowing the seafloor all the time. So I think it would be, but then if you stop that, is it still protected? Because there's still a lot of wastewater and nutrition's coming indirectly. And how do you stop that? And the ecosystem is stressed because of the warmer water, and how do you mitigate that? So it's a big, I think there will be a little, when we're getting close to this goal that has to be assessed by 2030, there will be a lot of discussion on what do we mean by protected, 30% protected. What do we mean by that? But it doesn't matter. It is going the right direction. Everyone knows, the people making the law, they know this. They're working on it, and the people doing activities in the ocean, they know this. The companies, they know this. They want to do this, but we have to make it easy for them. And the logic of the company is, if it doesn't cost much, and perfect sense, if it's cheap or for free, we will do it. If we can make a revenue, we will do it. But you cannot, if they have a margin of so and so much, and half of it is eaten up by the things they have to do to restore biodiversity, it's difficult for them, because they need that margin. So that is the conversation we have to have with these with the companies that are acting in the ocean.
Right. Thank you very much, Matthias, for this talk. Next week, welcome back. We'll have Ankit Karia, who is at the University of Copenhagen, and he'll talk about deep learning for digital twins of individual trees. That will be an in-person seminar as well, but in our office in Lund at Skellefteå.